Tonight, the Metropolitan Police apologises to the Commons Speaker after he's dragged into the row about the arrest of Lord Mandelson. Lindsay Hoyle tells MP he passed what he called relevant information to the police, that after Peter Mandelson's lawyers strongly denied what they called baseless claims that he was arrested as a flight risk. Also tonight, we go in search of Russia's sanction-busting shadow fleet in the English Channel and look at whether the UK is heading for a military confrontation on the seas. The Prime Minister hails a 7% drop in household energy prices. Is the cost of living finally starting to ease? I'll speak to the Energy Minister. On the eve of a critical test for Labour in the Gorton and Denton by-election, our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates has a special report from the constituency. And after Donald Trump delivered the longest ever State of the Union speech, we'll look at other marathon speeches in history and ask whatever happened to brevity being the soul of wit. Our duo tonight are never anything other than concise. Ranil Jayawardena and Kirsty Blackman will be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday. I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, it has been another busy and unexpected day in Westminster, dominated by a moment of drama this morning when the Speaker of the House of Commons he passed on what he called relevant information to the police after Peter Mandelson's lawyers strongly denied baseless claims, as they put it, that Peter Mandelson was arrested as a flight risk. Well, in the past hour, the Metropolitan Police has apologised to Sir Lindsay Hoyle for inadvertently revealing information. I hope you managed to follow all that. I think what's clear is that the shadow of the former US ambassador continues to hang over the government. PMQs, though, I should say, wasn't dominated by Peter Mandelson, but there was heat from all sides on all sorts of subjects, as Sam Coates reports. And I should say that his analysis does contain some flash photography.
They're being called the Pedo Defenders Party. Yes.
Amid all of the political turmoil and ahead of the crunch by-election on Thursday, there was anger, vitriol even, at Prime Minister's questions.
I have to say I was glad to learn that the Leader of the Opposition has finally admitted that they scammed the country.
And the rapid fire wasn't just between those at the opposing dispatch boxes.
For a government that is full of human rights lawyers, within and without, why do the opinions and human rights of Indigenous Chagossians not matter to him at all?
Look, there was a curiosity at Prime Minister's questions. For once, the biggest political story of the week didn't dominate at PMQs. Instead, Kemi Badenoch went on the issue of student loans.
I believe the student loans have become a debt trap. Will he cut interest rates on student loans?
But after the arrests of Peter Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, it was for the Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey to ask for more information. But listen to his lack of answer.
Will he, at the very least, commit to releasing the flight logs and related documents? Will he wait for the House to force the government to do that?
There's obviously a police investigation going on, and I think it's right, and I'm sure he agrees with this, that that has to go wherever the evidence takes it. And we have to let that investigation run its course.
The Tory leader said that the episode would haunt this government.
The defining moment of this man's premiership will not be breakfast clubs. It will be the sight of the man he appointed as ambassador to Washington just last year getting arrested.
But all of this, in many ways, overshadowed by a bombshell from the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, 15 minutes before PMQs.
Members will be aware of comments in the media regarding the arrest of Lord Mandelson. To prevent any inaccurate speculation, I'd like to confirm that upon receipt of information that I felt it was relevant, I passed this on to the Metropolitan Police in good faith, as is my duty and responsibility. It is regrettable this rapidly ended in the media, as this is a live investigation.
The Speaker's intervention directly led to the arrest of Peter Mandelson hours later. The Speaker now a player in that psychodrama. There's an ugly mood in politics at the moment.
Well, we should, of course, say that Peter Mandelson has denied any wrongdoing. His lawyers have said his arrest was prompted by a baseless suggestion that he was planning to leave the country. And Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has always vigorously denied any allegations of wrongdoing in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, our political correspondent, Mari Aurora, is here, as you can see, and she's joined by our duo for this evening, former Conservative Minister Sir Ranil Jayawardena and the SNP's Kirsty Blackman. We'll come to you both very shortly, but Mari, let's start with you. We have, of course, had this update this evening, an apology to the Speaker.
Exactly that, yes. So the kind of order of events were already outlined by that piece by Sam Coates there, where he was explaining how this has all happened. And clearly, Speaker Lindsay Hoyle has been furious with the fact that the information he's passed to the police has leaked so quickly, but also, therefore, is kind of naming him and dragging him into it in terms of in a public way. And so the Met Police have now had to issue an official apology. And so they've said the Met has apologised to the Speaker of the House of Commons this afternoon for inadvertently revealing information during an investigation into allegations of misconduct in public office. So police essentially admitting that they accidentally gave that information to Peter Mandelson. Now, we don't know if they were maybe mistaken in terms of which Speaker it was, because the original briefings from Mandelson's team was that it was the Lord Speaker, when, of course, Lindsay Hoyle is the Commons Speaker. And then the plot thickens. So we've had some sources to Sky News explaining to us that the Lord Speaker has been having urgent meetings with the Met Police and is having urgent meetings with them tomorrow, is expected to receive clarification as how he came to be incorrectly named as the source of the information that Lindsay Hoyle passed to the police about this idea that Peter Mandelson was trying to go to the British Virgin Islands. And sources have said that he wanted to know, when the media was widely reported, why the information was attributed to him. He was not contacted about the issue, and the false information was then corrected, but obviously after the fact. So he was then in the firing line for a moment.
Yeah, we were hearing Lord Forsyth's name initially, weren't we?
Exactly. And so they are trying to figure out what's gone on there, and really he's going to want an apology as to why he's been dragged into something that he actually has nothing to do with. So it's gotten quite messy, and it looks like the Met Police have kind of messed us up a little bit.
And, I mean, yeah, extraordinary twists and turns that we could not have predicted. Thank you, Mari, for explaining that, because it is actually getting a bit almost confusing now, isn't it? Let's bring our panel in, shall we? Kirsty and Ranil. Kirsty, I mean, it was interesting because we're talking about this, but actually it felt like it's sort of hanging over Parliament, but it wasn't really what came up at PMQs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been hanging over Parliament for a while now. We've had a month or so of constant things about Peter Mandelson, but then today, with the Speaker having to stand up and make a statement, and Speaker's statements are relatively unusual anyway, but having to stand up and say, in fact, it was him that was the source of this information, and that he was doing his duty, which was passing the information to the police. But I think Mari's right, this should never have been made public, and the police should never have told anyone that who they got this information from.
Yeah, we do not normally get this sort of information about what's going on behind the scenes. Ranil, what did you make of it all?
Yeah, I mean, a bit like journalists, so surely you just don't reveal your sources. So it is balmy that that's what's happened. I mean, I should say, of course, as you've said, everyone has the right to a fair trial, and so, of course, innocent until proven guilty in that front. But, you know, when this is such a dark cloud hanging over our political system, the police have got to get it right.
And everyone's trying to tread that very careful line, aren't they? What did you make of what we heard from... it was interesting that Kemi Badenoch chose to go on student loans, and we had Nigel Farage on Chagos. It feels like the government being attacked from all sides at the moment.
It does, and I think the government have been kind of not in a great position for some time now. I mean, they've made a lot of decisions that have been hugely unpopular. I think given that there was debates earlier on in the day and that so many Labour MPs are concerned about student loans, given that when Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, when he took over the role from Jeremy Corbyn as leader, he'd said that he was going to get rid of this system. He said he was going to make it much better. And he hasn't. You know, I think it's pretty horrific that you have a situation that people are paying off their student loans into, their 60s. And many people will never pay off their student loans. So I can understand why Kemi chose to go on that matter today. It is another one of those places where the Prime Minister is not in the same places as backbenchers.
Do you think she was right to do that?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a big issue of intergenerational fairness, I think. There are plenty of people across this country who've done the right thing in that they were told this is the way to further yourselves, this is the way to get a great career.
That was when the Tories were in power, though.
For sure, and indeed before that, Labour the first time round, under Blair and Brown. And yes, there was Plan 2 brought in. That's the scheme that's being now proposed should be tweaked. Kemi's got plans to make sure that the rates are lowered. But there's also a wider plan, of course, to say, well, there are some people taking courses, incurring huge debts, that should never incur those debts in the first place because actually those courses aren't a good use of their money or indeed taxpayers' money. But I think the fact that there's this, the fact that there's Chagos, which also is terribly unpopular with Labour voters and indeed many Labour MPs, there are just so many fires that Keir Starmer has to fight, and it's all of his own making. I mean, he chose, it wasn't in the manifesto, he chose to take forward this Chagos giveaway and give £35 billion along with the islands to Mauritius. No one forces him to do that. There is no international law binding on him that makes him do that. The ICJ has a particular carve-out for any part of the former Commonwealth or former Empire, rather. So it doesn't apply. He's made these decisions. He's made the decision not to do anything on student loans, and he's got to live with that now in the run-up to local elections.
And just, you know, on student loans, they could always do what we've done in Scotland, which is not have tuition fees. You know, actually trying to level that playing field, trying to ensure that people that are looking at the amount of debt that you could have, that they don't have to pay tuition fees. And it does, and it has ensured that people from deprived areas are more likely to go to uni than they were before.
Might mean tough decisions
which is really important.
elsewhere, though.
Absolutely, but actually higher education is important. It is important that we get the skills for the future.
Yeah, it's about priorities. Thank you both. We'll come back to you. Well, Sky News can reveal that Russian tankers are passing through British waters in direct defiance of Western sanctions. Dozens of vessels move through the English Channel every month, keeping the oil revenues that fund the war in Ukraine flowing. Well, our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso has been tracking this shadow fleet on the water.
These are the secret weapons in Russia's war on Ukraine, hiding in plain sight. We've been tracking Sanction tankers carrying the oil that funds the Kremlin to intercept them here, less than 10 miles from Dover. This is the shadow fleet on our shores.
So that's us, and we're heading. That's it. So that's us in the top corner, and we're heading into the shipping lane now.
We've been tracking 3 tankers for days to intercept them here.
There it is, there, Weigel.
That's the first of
This is the first of the Russian tankers, and that's coming down the shipping lane. We'll stop here near the sandbank, and then it'll come past us.
Right on schedule, the first comes into range.
So this is the Rigel. It's part of the shadow tanker fleet. It's come from Primorsk in the Baltic, a Russian port loaded with about 1 million barrels of oil. That's worth $55 million, roughly, at today's prices. It's sailing under a Cameroon flag, but it's sanctioned by the UK, the EU and other countries because they believe it is essentially funding Russia's war in Ukraine. The proceeds of that cargo ultimately will flow back to Moscow.
The Rigel is one of 3 tankers we've been tracking since early February, each sailing under a different flag and loaded at different Baltic ports, but all carrying Russian oil through the Straits of Dover.
French Navy, French Navy.
In January, French special forces seized a tanker sailing from Russia in the Mediterranean, and US forces have seized at least 7 since its crackdown on Venezuela. But despite the almost daily passage of sanctions ships through the Channel, including this, the Kusai, British intervention has largely involved checking documents.
This is a message from the United Kingdom's Maritime and Coast Guard Agency.
We overhear a message to its captain from the Coast Guard. They doubt the ship has valid insurance and want proof.
Please email with a copy of your civil liability certificate and or blue card within 24 hours of this request.
The Ministry of Defence says this is part of its robust response to Russia, but with around 800 vessels in the shadow fleet, pressure is growing for direct action.
Britain and its allies, we won't do this alone. We'll do it particularly with the Dutch and the Danes and the Norwegians and the seagoing nations of Northern Europe. they together, I think, will get much tougher with these Russian ships, even if they're escorted. And when that happens, I think we're heading probably sometime this year for some sort of militarised confrontation at sea.
The UK government says deterring, disrupting and degrading the Russian shadow fleet is a priority. But for now, the oil that greases Russia's war machine continues to flow, not in the shadows, but under our nose. Paul Kelso, Sky News in the English Channel.
We should say that Paul's report was mentioned during the Business and Trade Committee earlier today.
We're in a situation where UK components are still turning up in drones, which are fired at the brave Ukrainians. Last year, we imported potentially billions of pounds of oil products made with Russian oil. And this afternoon, Sky News is reporting that we have tankers sailing through the English Channel with up to $100 million worth of oil on board. How are we still in a position to shut down all trade of any sorts, either directly or indirectly, with President Putin's war machine?
Well, first of all, let's just acknowledge that it's the 4th anniversary yesterday, and we introduced a new set of sanctions yesterday, which perhaps we'll come on to. It is true that the Russian bear is a wily fox, to mix my metaphors, in the sense that, of course, they have sought to evade all our sanctions at every step of the way. And we've had to make sure that we are constantly updating and bringing in new elements of that process.
Well, for more on this, earlier I spoke to Lord West, former head of the Royal Navy, former Security Minister and current member of the Intelligence and Security Committee.
Lord West, thanks so much for talking to us. I have to say, I was pretty struck by these images that we've been running this morning, these sanctioned vessels right under our nose. Were you surprised by the images?
I was delighted that someone has actually gone to the effort of taking pictures of them there. I was aware this has been going on. It's something that I wanted to stop for 3 years, and it has a real impact. If we could stop it, it would have a real impact on Putin. And now with this war, this dreadful war having gone on 4 years, it's about time we did something. And a story like this, I think, brings it up, and maybe we'll put more pressure on to get moving and do something about it.
And what would that be?
Well, I think we'd have to stop these ships and then take them into British ports, the ones in the Channel, check about their insurance and things and hold them, because it's quite clear that they're breaking sanctions and breaking the rules.
When you say stop them, just to be specific...
Have to board them, and get on board and board them. I think that's what we should do, rather like we helped the Americans do that with one that was dealing with Venezuela, and I think we should do that to them now, and that will have a real impact on Putin very quickly.
Is there a risk of that escalating?
Well, I think the thing is, because it will have such an impact on him, I'm sure there'll be a lot of noise and heat. What exactly he can do about it is a different issue, and I think we could get the rest of Europe on side, and I'm sure, actually, we could get the Americans on side. They've done it once already. Admittedly, it was relating to Venezuela, but I think we could. And we've got the best maritime lawyers in the world in London. We still, in a sense, run global shipping from London, and they can come up with absolutely the reasons why this should not continue and why we're allowed to hold a ship. They are very dangerous. A lot of them are very old. They're not in good seaworthy condition. There's going to be a terrible accident, and they're not properly insured, some of them.
There must be a fear, though, if we did act in that way, of a reprisal from Russia.
I'm sure that there's a risk of that, but I don't think that must always stop you doing what's right.
Potential for military confrontation with Russia at sea?
Well, I don't see us being I don't see it developing to that, but what they might try and do is try and board and stop a British ship somewhere. He'll have difficulties. We've got less and less British ships, sadly. But stop a British flag ship and do something. I think that's more likely than there being a military confrontation, warship to warship.
Do you think there's a sense in which the UK is more vulnerable because it's isolated? We're not part of the EU, we're not the US. Do you think for that reason we're more vulnerable to Russia?
No, not at all. I think we still have very, very close links to the Americans. We are linked into the EU. The EU rely on us for a lot of military clout, and they see us as very important for that. So I don't think it does at all. I mean, our luck is that we're not lying alongside Russia. In a land sense, she's got to come across the whole of Europe before she can get to us. So in a sense, it makes us more secure.
You sound quite frustrated that we're not seeing more action.
I am. We should have done something earlier. A number of us have been saying this for a while, and we should have done something, because it will have a huge impact on Putin. It'll have a great impact on his... selling this oil is very important for him. And he's not winning this war, and he needs to realise he could lose it.
Why do you think more action isn't being taken then?
I think because people are scared of what he might do and scared of those things, and, oh, this is all too difficult. And I'm afraid sometimes it's easier not doing something.
So do you think we could act alongside Europe?
I'm sure we will be in that case, and in a NATO sense initially, because we have got a NATO plan for the bastion of the North Atlantic bastion, which we are a key player in. It's very important for us, and we will, do our bit there. And that is something that, again, puts pressure on Putin. Looking back in time to when the Soviet Union existed, it was when the American carrier battle groups, supported by our big anti-submarine warfare battle groups, went into the Arctic Ocean and near the Kola Peninsula, that the Soviets realised they couldn't afford, in money terms, to keep up. And that was one of the many reasons, there are others as well, that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So it is an area of huge strategic importance.
I just want to make sure I sort of understand the practicalities. I'm trying to get my head around it. If we did confiscate a ship at sea, what would then happen to it?
One would have to leave it, in a sense, to the lawyers. It would be a bit of an old Ming. I imagine what one's able to do, first of all, the oil is oil that shouldn't really have been gone because the sanctions are against it. That, I'm sure, would be sold somehow on the spot market where the money would go exactly, but it would be held by the European powers. As far as the ships go, they'll be sold for scrap. I mean, what's interesting is there's, for example, in Mumbai, there's one Indian who used to own one little coastal ship. He's now got 130 tankers. Well, he couldn't afford 130 tankers. These are old Ming, and he's filling them with oil, and it's being sold to India and countries like that, and it's making a lot of money for Putin, which he wouldn't get otherwise.
And lastly, I just want to ask you one question about defence spending. Suggestions, reports that perhaps we could see the government speeding up the pace at which they get to 3%.
Well, this was mentioned, of course, by Starmer, Prime Minister Starmer, at Munich, saying he was going to do that, which is great. Maybe that shows he understands it. What is quite clear is that the Chancellor is not letting him do it and is not agreeing with him. Well, he is the first Secretary of the Treasury, the Prime Minister, and if you're in charge, I've found this in the Navy, you bloody well tell people to get on with it, and she needs to be told to get on with it, because we need to do that. Our forces are rather too weak, and I think can't do what our nation thinks they can.
When would you like us to get to 3%?
I would like to get it by the end of this decade, without a doubt, and a bit earlier if it's possible. We need to start spending money today, because things have got to be done.
Right, let's bring our panel back in, shall we, Ranald and Kirsty? I mean, this story's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? These tankers right under our nose, sending billions in oil revenue to Russia. What did you make of these pictures when you saw them, Ranald?
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinary, and, bravo that this has now been exposed so that people at home can see what's going on. I think, Admiral the Lord West does make a really valid point, though, which is that it's really hard for any government. You wouldn't expect me to be here to defend the Labour government, but it's really hard for any government to do anything right now because the size of the Royal Navy is so small, and the ability to defend not only these islands, but also British shipping elsewhere in the world has been so diminished. And this is a generational thing. This has happened since the war. It's continued to deplete. And we're now seeing the consequences of that. And certainly post-Cold War and that seizing of the dividend at the end of the Cold War, we're now seeing that actually the world wasn't going to be permanently in a safe, idyllic state. There are going to be threats, and it is time that the government now actually owns the agenda on rearmament and indeed building more ships, recruiting more troops, so that we've got the capability, should we need that, whether that's in the English Channel or further afield, to take the right action. And of course, he is right. You've got to do, in my view, and I'd hope everyone in Parliament on whatever side believes this, you've got to do what's right. You've got to stand up for the British national interest, do what's right.
You mean action?
And take action
right
where necessary.
Now, as things stand.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Well, for a start, I'm not our defence spokesperson, right? So I'll do my best. You know, I think that what we've got and what we use is an awful lot of diplomatic solutions. We use a lot of sanctions. We use a lot of that kind of trying to lean on people, both with a soft power and with a bit of the harder power. But if we're sanctioning Russia, if we're stopping trade with Russia, if we're sanctioning individuals, but it's not working, actually we need to think about, well, are those sanctions effective, and what can we do that will ensure that those sanctions are effective, that we're not allowing the Russians to trade. I mean, I think probably we should have been more aware and had more of an understanding of what Russia was actually up to in the period when it was more quiet, when you know, they hadn't actively invaded Ukraine.
Well, when they were a member of the G8, you know,
exactly.
the threat hadn't gone away.
Exactly, and you know, Putin was never going to quietly lead a country and you know, and quietly look after his own people and not interfere with what other people were doing. So perhaps we should have, you know, not reduced the amount of ships in the way that we have. We should have been building more. In fact, we particularly were concerned about the fact that there wasn't, the ships were withdrawn that were going around the Scottish coastline, the Royal Navy ships that had been doing that were withdrawn. And actually that is a significant coastline. And there is, you know, the Lord West there was talking about the way that Russia would get to Britain and the fact that you've got to go across the whole of Europe, but there is possible to do it in a ship, you know, much more easily from the north of Russia.
I think that's such an important point, Kirsty. I think, you know, too often we consider this in terms of the land theatre, but actually the access through the north to Scotland, that is so much easier, frankly, for Russia and other actors, China comes to mind, to actually threaten us from. That's something that any government now and in the future really needs to take action on, to make sure that you've got those coastal defences. And I think this is, you know, this is proof that yes, soft power is important. Yes, you want to influence people around the world with liberal, democratic, small L, small d views. Yes, you should use sanctions where possible as well to state that we don't think something's acceptable and we're not going to play our part in being complicit in money laundering or whatever else.
Is that what it is? You know, some words rather than something that has teeth?
Well, this is my point. So soft power and even those legal instruments have a place, but ultimately hard power is how you set the rule book. And that's where America has retained its mantle.
I still think there's more that could be done in sanctioning the individuals, the people who are pals of Putin. I think there's more that could be done in restricting their movements and their ability to spend and buy, because that really leave it there. Putin where it hurts.
Thank you both. I know there's so much to say on this, but we will come back to you very shortly. That story is sure to feature heavily on our late night programme, The Wrap, tonight from 10 o'clock. Here to discuss all of today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers will be political commentator Adam Bolton and the Financial Times' Whitehall editor Lucy Fisher. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, millions of households are to see their energy bills fall from April. I've been speaking to the Energy Minister about whether we'll see further measures to ease the cost of living.
the best thing about being a Sky News journalist.
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
We're returning to the theme of energy now, and bills here in the UK are set to fall sharply in April. The regulator Ofgem has announced that the average bill is set to drop by 7%, which is the equivalent of around £117. It means that between April and June, the typical dual fuel bill will fall to £1,641 per year. That's down from £1,758. And compared to the level between April and June last year, that means a fall of £208, which is 11%. Well, I got more on this a little earlier with the Energy Minister, Martin McCluskey. Martin McCluskey, thanks so much for talking to us, and you've got some good news.
Yes, today our Ofgem announced the price cap, and it's a 7% reduction in energy bills from April. This is happening because of the action that the government took at the budget in November. You'll remember that the Chancellor said she was removing £150 of energy costs from bills, and that's been seen through today in the reduction in the price cap. Look, it's really important. It's good for families. It's good for people who are probably sick of opening up their bills and seeing how high energy bills are. But this isn't the end. Like, I know energy bills, even after this action, are still far too high, and we need to keep bearing down on prices. We've got other support in place, but we need to keep bearing down on the price of energy, because we know it's the key component of people's bills that are really giving them a lot of stress and anxiety.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Are you levelling with people? Because bills are still so high. They're basically sort of stabilising at a high level. Let's get the graph up that shows those figures, if we can. And I mean, look at this. Look, I mean, it was below 1,000 back in 2020, 2021. Mm-hmm. I mean, people are still really struggling.
They are. I totally accept that. I see that in my own constituency, and the people who write to me as the Minister for Energy Consumers, I see it every single day. But I think that graph on the wall really makes an important point, which is how exposed we are to volatile fossil fuels like oil and gas. That big spike that you see there was because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And that Russian invasion of Ukraine showed how reliant we were on foreign oil and gas. And everything the government's doing at the moment to try and maintain our support for clean power by 2030, building out the network, renewable energy. It's about making sure that that never happens again, because the only way that we're actually going to be in control of the price, and the only way we're going to get bills down for good, is by having clean power and reducing our reliance on oil and gas.
But you guys have put the cost of living right at the centre of it. That's what you want us to be talking about. And I mean, just look at that. People have long-term accumulated high costs.
Yeah.
Do you accept that people are really struggling?
I totally accept that. And you're not going to hear me coming on tonight and try and defend the cost of energy. The cost of energy needs to be lower. The action we've taken today, a 7% reduction, is significant. We've also got in place, this is obviously the price cap, so this is the average cost for the average household. People on fixed energy tariffs, which this reduction will also apply to, will be lower than that. So people should be shopping around looking for the best option for them and their own household, and making sure that they're getting the best deal. But the other thing I would say is that there's targeted support available on energy as well. So the £150 warm home discount, which has been delivered to 6 million households this winter, that's there for the most vulnerable low-income consumers as well.
Are you really targeting the most vulnerable people, though? Because people on prepayment meters are still paying more than people paying on direct debit.
Well, actually, on prepayment, from memory, prepayment meters, I think the cap today is actually lower than the standard cap on prepayment meters. I'm pretty sure of that. But on the warm home discount, that is targeted at people on low incomes, largely on means-tested benefits, and that's going automatically to people. So one of the changes that Labour made two changes to the warm home discount. We expanded the number of eligible households to 6 million, and we also made it automatic so that people weren't having to phone their energy company to receive it, and people are getting that support now. And actually, in the next couple of days, the deadline falls. Some people have received a letter saying, call us, because the data matching doesn't quite work. If you've got one of those letters and you haven't called, please do that by the end of the week. That's how you get that support.
OK, spring statement next week. We had a big budget surplus. are people finally, you know, going to start to see some of the good bits? We've had the tough bits. Are we going to see that money being spent?
You're not going to be surprised to hear me sit here tonight as a government minister say I'm not going to prejudge anything the Chancellor's going to do, either in this spring statement or in the budget later in the year. You know, you've said yourself...
But, you know, do you think broadly the Chancellor should see this as an opportunity to further ease the pressure on the cost of living?
I think we need to be cautious in the way that we approach this, because, yes, we've reported this surplus, yes, inflation is going down, but we need to make sure we make the right, you know, fiscal decisions to ensure that we retain the stability that that has frankly got us to where we are at the moment with this surplus and with lower interest rates and lower inflation.
So Labour backbenchers hoping for a bit of a splurge next week, they're going to be disappointed.
I'm not going to prejudge. I'm not involved in those discussions with the Chancellor about what she may or may not announce, so I'm not going to prejudge that. I'll be there next Wednesday watching the spring statement like everyone else.
All right, OK. Look, we want to talk to you about this extraordinary story, these images we've got, this shadow fleet. Why are the government not doing more on this? These tankers are just freely going across the channel. I mean, should we be doing more?
Look, we've just passed the 4th anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I think it's important in any of these discussions around Ukraine to remember exactly what people there are going through, and we stand, you know, solidly with the people of Ukraine through this. I think on the Russian shadow fleet, you know, we've already taken action alongside our allies with the French, with the US. The Defence Secretary in Munich a couple of weeks ago at the Munich Security Conference sat down with our allies in the Joint Expeditionary Force to work through some of the actions that we might be able to take on the Russian shadow fleet. So there is a lot of work already going on.
But what action are we... it feels like from the images that we've seen, we're just watching these boats go past.
But we've also taken, you know, we've also taken action with the French to intercept vessels. We've taken action. We saw that with Bella 1, with the US, you know, and we will carry on having those conversations with allies about how we best do this. But bear in mind, we have 3,000 sanctions already in place on Russia. 500 of them are on vessels.
Well, there's not much point in those sanctions if the boats are still going past.
Yes, but the action that we've taken has meant that Russian oil revenues are now at the lowest that they've been since 2020, a 27% reduction because of those sanctions. You know, and of course we'll look at other actions that we can take. I know that the MOD and the Defence Secretary is gripped by this. You know, you wouldn't expect me to come on and talk about operational details, but those discussions that he was having at Munich, I think, shows how seriously we're taking it, and so do the sanctions, which are, you know, stopping this transit and ensuring that the oil revenues from Russian oil fall.
OK, lots to talk about. Let's get the thoughts of our panel, Ranil and Kirsty, again. Ranil, I mean, governments choose what they are going to talk about and what they're going to put at the front of public consciousness, you know, stop the boats. Now we've got this government wants to talk about the cost of living. But, I mean, the cost of living, people are still struggling, as I was saying.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. And it's deeply troubling, actually, seeing some tweets coming out from government ministers, including, I believe, the Prime Minister, inferring that inflation falling means that prices will fall. The lack of economic understanding in this government is just astounding. And, you know, the price cap, I have to say, you know, the idea that this is the solution is for the birds. What is the solution is to take advantage of Britain's own natural resources. And, you know, that means take advantage of our oil and gas that is offshore, off the coast of Scotland largely, also off the coast of England.
Well, they would say the future is green energy.
But that is the way to bring down the cost of energy today. So if they are laser-focused, I think that's their wording, on bringing down the cost of living, then they would take the actions that are needed now, not hope for progress in 5-10 years' time.
Kirsty.
So starting off on the kind of cost of living stuff, the budget in autumn promised that people's bills would go down by 150 quid, right? They're not. They're only going down by £117. When Labour stood in the election, they said that people's bills would go down by £300. The bills are still going to be 373 quid more expensive.
They say that over a longer period of time.
But they're still £373 more expensive than Labour promised, right? So we are absolutely not out of the woods in terms of energy costs, and you can't avoid buying energy. Right? You can't avoid it. You need somewhere to live. You need some heat of some sort, particularly if you live in Scotland. And you need to buy food. And if you look at the inflation figures, Ranil's absolutely right. Just because inflation has dropped a bit, prices are still going up. And particularly if you look at things like food price inflation has remained high. We've still got an issue that you know, if you're going to buy butter or you're going to, I mean, don't buy olive oil. It's unbelievably expensive. You know, if you're going to buy the things that are the basic things that people need, that they have to buy, you can avoid buying expensive cars. You can avoid taking planes. You can't avoid buying food and energy. And so I think the government really needs to look at the cost of living for those things, for the things that the people who are struggling the most. We've got such a high proportion of their income being spent on. They absolutely have not got the cost of living crisis under control. They need to do more.
And this is what comes up again and again on the doorstep. OK, thank you both. We will come back to you. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. Gorton and Denton heads to the polls tomorrow. Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates has been getting the views of voters in the Greater Manchester constituency ahead of that crucial by-election. Well, all eyes in Westminster will be on that crucial by-election in Greater Manchester tomorrow. The vote in Gorton and Denton is a critical test for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. They're being squeezed on both sides by Reform and the Greens. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has this special report from the constituency.
180-mile trek north from Westminster. Party leaders and cabinet ministers have been out in force, touring the streets of one South Manchester suburb.
Chaotic.
You only get all these here when a by-election really matters. It's been Labour round here for almost a century, but is voters moving from the centre and an increasingly divided constituency the reason some are less willing to engage? Excuse me, madam, can I talk to you about the election? Can we talk to you about the election?
Sorry.
Can we talk to you about the election?
Oh, sorry.
But those that did chat were angry.
I've never not voted before, ever, but really disillusioned this time.
I voted, well, at first I voted for Labour, but then obviously, you know, things change.
Green.
And why is that?
Because of Palestine.
Labour will win, inshallah. Why not?
For many years, the Labour name was enough to unite the disparate forces round here. But is this still true? Gorton and Denton is a constituency split in half. Look at this. In Gorton, in the west, there are more ethnic minority voters. To the east, in Denton, there are more white voters and, look at this, voters over 60. But here's the thing. There are twice as many voters in Gorton as there are in Denton, making it a bigger challenge for reform. We did find passion for reform in this pub.
Could you have poured that perfect, isn't it?
Watching United play.
I'm not a racist person or nothing like that, but I think it's getting a bit out of control, the country that I live in, that I was brought up in.
But the country's going down the drain, it's as simple as that.
What do you want politicians to sort out?
Get out of the bubble and see what the real world's like. They keep telling us that the cost of living's not going up. Well, everybody knows it is. You only have to go in the supermarket to find that out.
The question asked on the other side of the room is which party is best placed to beat Reform UK?
I'd vote for Labour if it meant, if I thought that was the solid vote to stop Reform getting in, I'd vote Labour.
Do you think the Greens have a serious and realistic chance of winning on Thursday?
Yes, I think they've really galvanised a vote on the left side of politics in this country, one that is more about humanity and common decency.
If Andy Burnham had been the Labour candidate, would that have made a difference?
I'd have voted for it. Definitely.
In this central Manchester Convention Centre, we will get the by-election result in the early hours of Friday morning, and it will be read as a verdict on the Prime Minister. He was the person that blocked a standout Labour candidate, Andy Burnham, so voters will be going to the polls on the basis of his record instead. Is Keir Starmer the right person to navigate this era of three-party politics? This dance studio gearing up for polling day, a by-election causing disruption here as well as in Westminster.
So the council have just dropped this off this afternoon. We lift all of the mats and turn it into a voting station.
The result, a sign of whether there's more turmoil to come. Sam Coates, Sky News, Gorton and Denton.
Well, let's just remind you of who is running in the Gorton and Denton by-election. The full list of candidates is on your screen now. And I should also say we're going to have full coverage of that by-election tomorrow evening. Let's bring in our panel again, shall we, Ranil and Kirsty. We need to be a bit careful what we say. I think it's fair to say neither of you really have a dog in this race, but you definitely don't.
We really don't.
And your party, well,
it's of course important everyone...
It's a three-horse race, really, isn't it?
It's important everyone always has the chance to vote for the Conservative Party, in my view, wherever they are in the country, whatever the election might be, and so it's important there is a candidate.
Yes.
But
it's, I mean, by-elections are important, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, the fact that that voter there was saying that he would have voted Labour had it been Andy Burnham really does play out the problem for Labour here, that if they don't win a seat that they've held for generations, where a viable local candidate who was well known, who is popular, who all the polling says was the best placed person to win, wasn't allowed to stand because Keir Starmer blocked him, because he's afraid that he's going to be challenged by him. Well, there's only one person who has to own that defeat, and that's the Prime Minister himself. And I'm sure there'll be Labour MPs watching that and going, look, we had a chance here to take a different path.
And you'll remember the last by-election was Runcorn, Helsby, Sarah Pochen won for Reform, 6 votes. I mean, it could be tight this time as well.
It could be, and they're all throwing everything at it as well. I mean, we have seen constantly... Well, Parliament today was pretty quiet. There was quite a lot of people who were not around Parliament today who normally are. I had a couple of meetings cancelled with people that I'd expected to have meetings with today because they've gone to go and campaign in the by-election. So certainly, I think the forerunners particularly are throwing everything they possibly can at it. So we shall see who's got the best campaign machine, who's got the best messaging. Are people going to look to kick the government because they're looking at the cost of living, for example, or will they manage to hold the seat that they've held for generations? We'll see.
Thank you both. We will obviously be talking about that a lot tomorrow evening and into the weekend. We'll still to come on Politics Hub after Donald Trump delivers the longest State of the Union address in history. We'll look at whether length makes a political speech one for the ages.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand,
Wow.
here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK?
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shot's rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
Well, Donald Trump spoke for 1 hour and 48 minutes last night in what was the longest ever State of the Union address. The US President is, of course, known for his lengthy monologues, but is a duration a guarantee of long-lasting impact? We thought we'd have a look at some pretty famous political speeches and see if our panel, as an unexpected quiz, can guess how long they were. Right, there, that's Donald Trump. We know about that one. Let's get our first one up, shall we? Here we go. Do you recognise that? Fidel Castro. This was when he was first in power, addressing the UN, talking about the Cuban Revolution. I don't know, it's a slightly niche one. Let's have a guess.
Do you want to go first?
Just a number, just
I think
any
we're
number.
guaranteed to look like idiots here. Gosh. Is it hours here? Are we talking hours?
I'll give you a clue. It's long.
Is this 25 hours, 5 minutes or something like that?
OK, that's a guess.
Surely not. You can't possibly talk for more than 24 hours. An hour and a half.
OK, I think you're closer. Yeah, you definitely are closer. God, I'm bad at maths. 4 hours, 29 minutes. Right, let's do the next one. This is a more recent one. This is Cory Booker. Do you remember this? This was recent.
So this is 25 hours?
Yes, and
5 minutes.
25 hours. Wow, that is incredible knowledge. That is incredible knowledge. Yeah, perfect. 25 hours and 5 minutes. Right. Longest speech in Congress history, that was. We're rattling through these. Next one. This is, I think, there you go, JFK, his inauguration speech in 1961. Do you remember this one? Famous speech. Ask not what you can.
I think before our time.
Didn't remember it personally, I have to say.
Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. How long do you think that was?
45 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good guess.
I mean, it was actually 14 minutes.
Really?
So it just shows, you know, maybe the shorter the better. OK, let's have our next one, which I believe this is one of the most famous speeches in history, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. This isn't actually him making the speech, as you can see, in 1863. How long do you think that was?
I think there were some long speeches back then.
Yes.
You know, so you could potentially go 3 hours or something.
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
quick one.
So the impact, yes.
Right, Nelson Mandela we've also got here. This was his speech before his trial in 1964. And it was...
You can go first, I've been so wrong.
It was a key moment in the apartheid struggle, it was...
Well, you were saying about impact inversely correlating with length. So let's say 15 minutes.
It was 3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
long one. And finally, Ronald Reagan. There he is. I think you'll probably recognise this. This was the Berlin Wall, 1987. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, he said. How long was that speech?
Another 10 minutes, a nice short one.
Go with that.
Not that far off. Our paddler agreed. It was 26 minutes. So do you think there's a correlation between impact and length?
Well, clearly not, if the Mandela speech was long.
Absolutely. That's true. Sometimes it's the right occasion, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I suppose, you know, in our digital age that we're in now, things have got a lot quicker, haven't
Everything's
they? Apart from last night.
I don't know how anybody can possibly speak for 25 hours. I mean, that is an incredible length. I can't stay awake for 25 hours, never mind speak for that length.
I think they're allowed to have interventions and then they can leave the chamber for a while to pop to the loo or whatever while someone is intervening and giving them a very long intervention. I'm not sure that's in order in the
No, you can't do that in the
Either of you made a very long
unfortunately.
speech, quickly?
Half an hour, something like that.
40-odd minutes, because I was annoyed that Theresa May called an election.
OK. We'll allow. Thank you both. That is it for tonight. We will see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee.